Hey guys, it's me, Jacob, again, and this is going to be the ninth video in my series on studying JavaScript. Today I got 6 hours today. I'm probably not going to do another hour, but theoretically I could. Um, Today was a little bit different. The last couple days I've been reading source code. Um, a lot, like maybe 90% of the entire study session. And this time I read I reread some of I read for the first time some of the MDN documentation, and I reread some of the MDN documentation again. And this whole technique is part of something that some of you may be familiar with, some of you might not be familiar with, but there's this study technique known as spaced repetition. And so, like, it's better if you and I probably should talk about this more, because this is something that when I try and learn stuff, I try and learn it in the most efficient way possible, to the best of my knowledge and ability. um, uh, and so, like, spaced repetition is something you should try and leverage. um, and so it's better to not necessarily repeat things um, immediately after them. It's better to kind of like do it and then be somewhat intelligent about when you repeat it for the next iteration, right? And so I read some of the MDN documentation, like it was probably the first thing I did, like maybe 9 days ago or something like that. And I didn't just keep rereading it over and over again. Instead, I jumped into reading source code. And when you read source code, there's like a natural sort of spaced repetition that occurs, especially if you read it the way I do, which I built this web app that basically I'll clone a repo and then I'll upload it to S3, and then through this web app, it'll keep track of files that I've read, and then it'll not show those to me again. And so I'll keep seeing new files from a repo until I finish the entire repo, and then it'll reset. And it shuffles around all the files that you see until you've read it. So in a sense, you get exposed to everything um, in a very uniform but also random order. And because it can take a couple different days to get through a repo, unless you're really focused on that one, which I never do that. Instead, I have multiple repos and I'm reading chunks of each one of them each day. You end up having spaced repetition anyways. And that's really good. You want to have that built into basically everything that you're doing. But anyways, today was focused on documentation, and I mean, I covered a bunch of different things. You know, some of the classic things is just going deeper into objects and the prototype things, and then just like, in source code you'll see some of the methods that are just by default part of an object used, like object.assign, object.has own property, object.define property. Some of these I don't have completely memorized, but there are a bunch of these different patterns that happen, right? Similarly with function, this one I can remember a little bit more. There's like the three main ones, which are like bind, apply, and call. But also I learned a little bit more, or refreshed, arrow functions. Arrow functions are really kind of nasty because there's so many permutations. You can have parentheses around them, you can have no parentheses, and it all just kind of depends. And in the wild, like when you're just reading source code, you see all of the different variants. Arrow functions are pretty prevalent. Some of the other things that I kind of covered a little bit in this reading was, I got to the destructure syntax, which is basically just unpacking like a list or an object. I think you might be able to do it within the map. And then there's also two different sides of the same coin. There's the spread operator, which is doing ... And then that's really useful. It takes a object and turns it into key values, takes a list, turns it into values. There's the rest thing, which is the opposite, where it basically you use it as a parameter in a function, and it allows your function to become variadic. That's how you say it. This is actually very similar to Python, so that was very easy for me to understand. And you know what I actually did is I read Wikipedia's article on JavaScript, and I'm always amazed at how high quality Wikipedia's information is on computer science. On a lot of other stuff, it's just, I think, trash. But I only use it for computer science anyways, and it's like really on point. Like one of the problems with MDN documentation, right, is that it does not emphasize what's important and what's not important. It just throws everything at you, even though some of those things are used like 1 out of 1,000 files or something. Like there's stuff in the documentation I haven't seen once, and I've been just reading source code. Maybe I missed it, but like I'm sure there's some stuff in there, that I've just not seen even once. But some of the other things I looked at was like some of the string built-in methods, some of the array built-in methods, some of the map. I haven't really seen maps much. I think it's because JavaScript programmers just use objects, but maps they seem pretty appealing to me in a lot of ways, because one of the first things I think about with objects in JavaScript is, what if you just overwrite some of the other stuff that's in it? Because it's all just like a dictionary in Python, and it's like, you don't want to just assign some function unnecessarily. I don't know. I think there's some other stuff. Oh yeah, there's like object.freeze that could prevent that from happening. And some of the important ones with arrays are like slice and splice, I've seen. Don't know what that really does. A lot of this whole phase, again, I'll reiterate this, it's not about doing depth first search. Don't waste your time doing depth first search. Encounter reality, and the more times you see a pattern, the more it makes sense to actually study that pattern. Until you've actually encountered it a lot, let it go. Ignore it. It doesn't matter. It basically is noise. Computer science is made up of things that survive and succeed, and things that evolutionarily are abandoned and never get used. Don't pay attention to the things that don't ever get used, because in a sense all you want to focus on is what is ubiquitous. And even in something like JavaScript or Python, more so in JavaScript, there are things that are basically just like unnecessary and not used. And if you look enough into the ecosystem, you may or may not find it. I'm not going to say that these things literally don't exist. And I'll be able to talk about that with more data behind it, like intuitive data that I've gathered from just going through reading this stuff and studying it, about what really is important. One thing that's kind of funny that seems really antiquated is there's 2 ways to import and export things. Really, there's one way to import things, more or less. There's a bunch of different syntaxes that are applicable with different ways of exporting things. There's 2 ways to export things. There's like many patterns of exporting things. Like I probably could list on my hand like 5 or 6 or 7 patterns that I've seen, where it's like some it'll have module.exports at the bottom. Others it'll do like just exports dot something. And then others it'll do, what seems pretty clear. You have export and then bracket and then the name of all the different properties inside of the module, which could be functions or objects or prototypes or constants. And then there's the one that has the default word in it, export default. But when you really get down to it, you don't need export default really anymore. It doesn't really serve a purpose truly. The named exports are, I think, probably better, and you don't but even then I can, I guess, still sort of see how if you look at a library like React has a default export for its main library, which is React, right? And that makes it easy for you to namespace it and recognize it. So it's like React dot whatever is inside of React that's exported by default. So that's not too bad, right? But yeah, so it was a pretty good day. I had a lot of sticking points today because I was just sort of tired and like bored and burnt out of doing it. Yeah, but it did kind of click at one point, and I was enjoying it a little bit more. I was more focused, more interested in it. I got into WebAssembly a little bit, but then I moved backwards because I was like, WebAssembly is pretty interesting and exciting, but I don't want to get I don't want to get spread too thin, and I'm really trying to master JavaScript, right? And I guess CSS. I think I know how I'm gonna learn CSS finally, and it's not cool, and it's not like inspiring or anything. It's actually like the most boring brute force way. It's memorizing every single CSS, what do they call it, attributes or something. Just let me look this up. CSS properties. There's just like, I don't know, 300 or something. And at the beginning, you're just like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. And for every property, there might be like infinity values that it could have, or like just some weird discrete set of like, you can have 5 strings for display. It's flex, or it's like absolute, or this. It's just 5 different things. That's it. So you actually have to have that memorized too. But it's the same thing as I said before. The way I'm going to do it is read the reference, but not read any of the definitions. I'm just going to read technically things you could use, like at media, at keyframes, display, flex, justify, content, maybe, I don't know, align text. There's all these different random ones, right? I'm going to read those, and then I'm going to read source code. And I'm going to eventually figure out which ones are being used by the libraries I'm at least studying, and probably just do what other people are doing. I'm not going to waste any time learning any of the things that don't stick out. I'm going to understand more or less what you put into those different things. I'm not really focused on CSS that much, but it's really hard to do anything in a front end without having to deal with CSS, basically. And so I'm going to do it to some extent. It's not my main focus, obviously. JavaScript is. But yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, okay, yeah, we're at about 13 minutes. Pretty good. Kind of tired, though. I feel like, so I've been watching some other YouTube creators in my space, There are a bunch of different styles of, like, programming-based YouTube channels, right? Most of them are, like, video games, which is cool. I understand that. In fact, I want to do that. If you guys are interested, I'm definitely planning on making games with Godot. That's pretty much it. I want to make network games with Godot, but I'm trying to get through a lot of this website stuff first because I think it's much, much more relevant. And the game dev world is so competitive already and really rehashed, right? No one wants to say this, I don't think, but like, games are beautiful. They're beautiful, right? And that's what draws people in. It's like you see this aesthetic, this like, and that's where the uniqueness is. But the programming for a lot of these games is fucking boring. There's no innovation at all. Like, if you're an indie developer, I just feel like that's the gold mine. You can innovate whatever you want, but I feel like it takes a lot of programming finesse and skill and creativity to actually do that and actually make it fun in the game. And so no one ends up doing that. Or like a very, very small fraction of people do. You know? But I'm not trying to detract from the beauty of the art style, the animation, and just the polish. There's a real polish and you know, like shimmer to a lot of, and I like seeing it too. It's like, it's fun and cool to look at, right? So I'll probably get into that eventually. But then there's sort of your like YouTubers, you're like programming YouTubers that are comedians or something. Yeah, so like they make, you know, there's this pattern. They're like interns at a program, like interns on their first day coding or something, or like and some of them do it really well. There's like a few that I actually like, and then most of them I'm just like, this is just like some trending TikTok shit or something. It's like, I don't know. You know, and I guess there's like the educational channels that are just like pure education, but there's the good education, which I don't really know where it is. No, I have some ideas of that. And then there's just the tutorial, intro, beginner, kill me stuff, where it's just like, these people are just, we don't need another intro to X thing. But that's what gets the most views, because statistically there are the most beginners. Because it takes longer and longer to become more and more intermediate, and then level of like expertise, right? And yet that's what you see like the most content for. You don't need more content for it, probably, but what you see is like, because it has the highest supply, the highest demand potentially, that's what people end up going for. And their channels are just like deadbeat. Like I don't think I'm gonna learn anything from watching those channels. And I don't. They're like clickbait. They're like clickbait for like, I don't know, beginners. And that's okay, you know? Beginners need a place to go, but, you know, you don't get good at programming by watching beginner tutorials. Tech with Tim. Just to throw it out there, like, yeah, I mean, he's probably really good at programming. I probably shouldn't say that. I don't know. I haven't seen like enough of his things. What I mean is I shouldn't say that he's just for beginners or something. But he definitely does have some content that appears that way, right? It's literally titled that way, like introduction. And I watched one of his code jams, and actually the most recent one that was like 2 weeks ago, wasn't really that impressed. It was like there was no review of the code at all. It was basically just like here's some flashy websites with planets spinning around, and I picked the ones that were the easiest for me to like. Oh no, I think I may have detected. I was watching one of my videos in like this sound clip, and I think maybe it's something on my desk that vibrates when I. But anyways, what I was trying to say is like, it just felt like his channel was basically about the visual appeal and the user interface and how easy it was to use that and how natural it was, and that's how he ranked this. And it's just like, this is just like video games but for websites. Where's the like, nothing really interesting here, nothing that substantial. Definitely nothing I'm interested in. It was kind of cool to see for like 5 minutes, and this is the opinion I had of it afterwards, as like, yeah. So anyways, I'm not trying to trash anyone, obviously. I'm over here struggling to even like, you know, do anything. But I've recognized that I feel like there's a place in this ecosystem that is not fulfilled quite yet. And I think I'm going to go more for that angle, which is like authentic, which is not filled with video editing and processing and all this noise instead of just like signal. What we're trying to do is learn how to program, and you don't need all of these bells and whistles to talk about learning how to do that. You need to build a vocabulary, you need to build a mental conceptual map and understanding. You need to go through the permutations of the source code. You need to see someone who's seriously trying to do that, not just put on a show and get as many clicks as possible, right? And who's interested in like doing stuff that is more substantial than a lot of the stuff that I've seen, you know. But I'm, yeah. So anyways, this has been a long ramble. This is obviously not about JavaScript and studying it anymore, but you know, this is stuff that I think about too. You know, I'm studying this stuff for programming. I sure hope that sound is not messing it up, but I study this stuff for programming, and it's this. And I upload these videos, and still haven't had like what appears like any real views. All I get are comments that are from bots that immediately get taken down. So like, I mean, we're fighting for any amount of attention at this point in time, and I believe, I mean, it's probably going to be like this for a long time, if not forever. I'm not convinced that there actually is a market on YouTube for what I'm trying to do, because it's just not. But you know, we'll see. I'm not gonna give up because it's so easy to do this. This is what I love about my style, is like, I'm not gonna pretend like it's that interesting or that refined. Like, I'm not editing videos. I'm not doing really complicated overlays or anything. I'm fucking busy trying to do complicated stuff in the background, and I'm just sort of trying to talk to other people about the stuff that I'm doing. I don't have time to be really engaging in the traditional YouTube way. That doesn't mean that the things and the ideas and feelings and the stuff that I'm doing isn't engaging, but it just means that it's going to probably struggle to ever succeed. But, you know, that's okay with me. Like I said, I calculated the math. This isn't that hard. I think this actually balances out doing this type of study, because you're really mentally invested in this stuff, and having this sort of dumping sort of thing where it makes it more significant. It's like, even though I'm not talking to anyone, I am talking, and it is communicative. In a weird way, it's still social, even though it may have no one on the other end. So, you know, I don't really mind that. I actually kind of like have come to enjoy this process of documenting what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how I feel about it. Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I like it. So anyways, go and check out my blog. Smash the like button into little pieces. Post comments. Do everything so that we can take over the world. And you know, mostly just take care of yourself, and thanks for watching, and peace out.